Oh, hey there. I guess you probably want to know how I like these goggles. Well, they're quite interesting. Let me tell you about it. So, a few months back, DroneMask emailed me and asked if I wanted to try out their DroneMask 2 goggles. And so, of course, I said yes. They sent them to me. I got them all in box, got them set up with the drone, took them out for the first test flight, and well, actually, before I go there, let me explain a bit about how these goggles work. They're actually quite ingeniously designed. You just take your phone off the drone remote, put it in these DroneMask goggles, and then connect it to the controller with a longer USB cable. Now, you might be wondering how that differs from your standard $30 VR goggles from Walmart. The main difference is that most VR goggles have a separate lens for each eye, which makes it so that your phone has to split the screen and show a downscaled version of the image on each half of the screen, whereas DroneMask 2 has some kind of fancy lenses in here that let you see the whole phone screen with both eyes at the same time. And so because you're using the whole phone screen instead of splitting it in half, it gives you over twice the resolution and you don't have to use some special VR app to make it work with these goggles. And they have some other cool features, like they have these little flaps that let you stick your finger in here and interact with your phone while the headset is on your head. And it also has a little patch that you can take off so that you can put your phone in here and have the phone's camera see outside of it for kind of augmented reality things. Not super useful for flying a drone, but kind of a cool feature. Now, that is all great and well, but the real question is, how well does it actually work in the real world flying a drone? Now, just a little note here, while DroneMask did send me these, they're not paying me to make this video and they don't have any control over what I say about them, so I'm just giving you my honest thoughts on the product. So after carefully unboxing these goggles, I popped my phone into them and connected them to the controller of my Air 2S and took it out for a spin. And they actually worked quite well. I've tried using regular phone VR goggles to fly my drone before, and it's just never really been a good enough experience to make me want to do it again. But with the DroneMask, I actually really enjoyed the experience because I could see the video feed on my phone in a lot higher quality than the other phone-based VR goggles. And these goggles also let you do it directly from the native DJI Fly app instead of having to use something like Lychee or some other app to make it work. It's just a lot faster and easier to get going. And switching the gimbal mode to FPV and ripping around in sport mode makes it an even more immersive and fun experience, and I actually really enjoyed it. Now, it wasn't without its hiccups. At least initially, I couldn't get the long USB-C cable that was included to work, but I've got lots of USB-C cables, so that wasn't really a big deal. Another issue that I ran into was that on the first flight, the goggles were really digging into my nose to the point where I tried all kinds of things, from attempting to tuck the edge of my hoodie between my nose and the goggles, to cutting up little bits of socks to tape over the nose rest. Tried all kinds of things, and then I finally realized that I hadn't tightened the headband here, and so all the weight was resting on my nose instead of being like pressed against my face and having my face support it. And so once I tightened up the headband, it was a lot more comfortable. But nonetheless, wearing a kind of big, heavy, unwieldy thing on your head does get kind of tiring after a while. But then again, people are wearing stuff like this on their head for much less useful reasons than this. All in all though, I've got to say that they really work quite well, probably better than any other phone-based VR goggles out there. Now obviously they aren't going to be Apple Vision Pro quality or in the same league as DJI goggles, but they definitely can give you that immersive FPV experience, at least as much as can be experienced with a non-FPV drone. But in spite of my good experiences, I just wasn't quite happy. You see, I only have DJI RC remotes with built-in screens for my newer drones, so I was limited in what drones I could use with these goggles, and the only drone that I could disconnect my phone from the remote and put it in these goggles was my older Air 2S. And what I really wanted to be able to do was to fly my newer drones with these goggles, especially the Air 3, because it has a lot more power and a much better developed FPV gimbal mode. But that seemed to be impossible without getting a different controller. That is, until I ran across someone on a drone forum claiming that the DJI RC2 could output HDMI through USB-C port with an adapter. And so, hot on the trail of this new idea, I ordered a USB-C to HDMI adapter from Amazon so I could test out the concept of connecting my DJI RC2 to a 6-inch HDMI monitor that would go inside of these goggles instead of the phone. And after waiting a couple days for Amazon to deliver, I finally had all the required parts, connected everything together, and it worked. In fact, it worked even better than using the goggles with my phone. The 5.5-inch 16:9 screen displays the image from the drone larger than my phone would and really filled my field of view and gives you a lot more immersive experience than just using a phone. And because you're connected to a remote that also has a built-in screen, you can just always flip the goggles up and adjust the settings directly on the RC2, or just switch to flying the drone on the screen. And you could even fly the drone through the goggles and let another person watch you on the remote, or fly through the remote and let another person experience the flight through these goggles. And with the Air 3 and connected HDMI monitor, it's really fun to fly with these DroneMask 2 goggles. Flying up and down our gravel road fairly fast just gives you an adrenaline rush that just flying from a screen can't give you. Now, for anyone who's wondering exactly how I have this set up, I just have a cheap USB-C to HDMI adapter that I plug into the USB port on the bottom of the RC2, and then from there I have a short HDMI cable going to my FieldWorld F6 Plus monitor, which I power with a small Sony NPF battery and squeeze into the goggles where the phone is supposed to go. And I'll link up to all this stuff that I'm using as well as the goggles in the description. And no, in case you're wondering, this does not work with the original DJI RC, it only works with the DJI RC2. It's kind of a slightly hacked solution, but it does work surprisingly well. Now, would I get one of these monitors just for this if I didn't already have one around my studio? Probably not, because it costs almost as much as some dedicated VR goggles with HDMI inputs, so it's likely not going to be worth it. Now, all in all, what do I think of these goggles? Would I recommend them, and are they worth it? At $179, they're not a particularly cheap accessory, and in general, they're kind of a fun thing to rip around with. On this channel, I'm more focused on filming with drones than flying for fun, and in general, goggles aren't going to particularly get you better shots, but I can see one really great use case for these with flying for cinematic shots. And that is flying in bright sun. Many times in the bright sun, your screen gets so washed out that it's just really hard to see exactly the framing of your shot, the settings, the brightness. So being able to throw your phone or a monitor into these goggles and look through the goggles instead of having to look at a screen is a huge benefit. So would I recommend them? They're a great product, a lot of fun, and for some people they're going to be just what they want, but to me they're a little hard to unequivocally recommend for the price, especially considering you can get the DJI Integra goggles for just under twice as much right now, which should give you a much better experience than any phone-based goggles could, and they work with the Mini 3 Pro, Mini 4 Pro, Air 3, and Mavic 3 lineup. Now for drones like the Air 2S or Mini 2, these are going to be your best option to get an FPV experience, and if you want phone-based FPV goggles, something a little bit cheaper than DJI goggles, these are going to be the best ones to get, and the lenses that let you see the whole screen with both eyes and the flaps that let you change the settings while you have the goggles on. They're really game-changing features that make them way more usable than regular phone VR goggles. And if you'd like to learn how to get amazing shots with whatever drone you have with or without goggles, I have a completely free 45-minute drone filmmaking training where I share my top 10 secrets to cinematic drone shots. So make sure to go check that out, link is in the description. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos just like this.